The new Snoke comic is fascinating, and mostly due to the fact that it feels like a Kylo Ren comic. It showcases Snoke's abusive manipulation of Ben Solo under his tutelage, and most of what we see unfold is heartbreaking. One thing I'd like to mention is this comic seems to focus heavily on Snoke's obsidian ring when framing him up. This does lead me to believe it holds a real significance, but in the words of Snoke,
we shall see.
In this story, Snoke is presented to us, and I realize I've been using this kind of language frequently, as the inverse of Yoda. Just like Yoda, Snoke uses Dagobah as the teaching grounds of his primary lesson to Ben Solo, but what he tells Ben Solo is literally the antithesis of everything Yoda taught Luke during his time on Dagobah. One thing I'd also like to talk about very quickly is the sentiment expressed by Snoke as he dangles Kylo Ren over a cliff in the introduction, as he's testing Kylo's power. Snoke tells Kylo that he feels his powerlessness. Then Snoke proceeds to say that powerless men often turn to anger. They lash out blindly with their rage. Now, if this isn't the exact summation of Kylo as a character, I don't know what is. However, I find it interesting that the only time Snoke thinks Kylo has finally resolved his inner conflict is when Kylo himself has decided to kill his abuser, Snoke. As Palpatine would say,
Ironic.
a lot of what Snoke teaches Kylo in this comic doesn't exactly stick or work as demonstrated in the actual films, and sure, we hear Kylo parrot sentiments from his master throughout both films and even after Snoke's death, but for me, it's more like a conditioned response at this point. When the both of them initially land on Dagobah, we are presented with a familiar series of events. Kylo is holding the iconic helmet, which hides his face, and Snoke says, "Leave it." It's clear that Kylo needs his helmet to help him feel powerful, but immediately, Snoke backhands Kylo across his face in absolute disgust. The fact that Snoke tells Kylo that he cannot pretend to be Vader speaks volumes to Snoke's emotional manipulation of Ben Solo. On the one hand, Snoke dangles his heritage and importance in front of him. He calls him his new Vader, but the truth is, this disgusts Snoke. Snoke sees Kylo using the mask as one other connection to the past that he wants Ben Solo to destroy. And like I said, this adds more weight to Snoke calling Kylo Ren a child in a mask in The Last Jedi. It also recontextualizes Kylo's breaking of the helmet in a different light for me now. At first, I figured it was Kylo realizing he should show himself rather than use the mask as a way to intimidate. Perhaps he will truly stop pretending to be the new Vader. But now it seems to me that this was just a powerless man lashing out in anger. He breaks that helmet not really for himself, not to really stop pretending, but to essentially please Supreme Leader Snoke, and maybe because he didn't want to face the pain that comes with being made fun of. I mean, he is literally bullied by Snoke over what he wears. People breaking objects after intense bouts of anger and emotional turmoil, it's a real life thing, and often these individuals regret that action eventually. The fact the helmet is coming back in The Rise of Skywalker, and even if that's only for a brief period, shows to me that Kylo has accepted the past and his pain for what it is. And it's a bit of a rebellious act against his old manipulative master. We also learn a little bit more about Snoke's thoughts towards Luke, since Luke's presence can be felt on the planet. What's interesting is Snoke admits his real fear of Luke Skywalker. Snoke also respects Luke as a formidable Jedi, but of course Kylo thinks his old master is nothing but weak. But this is only Kylo Ren projecting his own weakness, that he's scared to death of his own uncle. Snoke throws another jab at Kylo during this moment, letting him know that his plans for the galaxy would have been completed long ago had his uncle been at his side. This does raise the implication that Snoke may have been present at the Jedi Temple created by Luke, but this is speculation on my behalf. And to add to Snoke using Kylo's bloodline to both lift him up as well as kind of put him down, when he mentions Luke being by his side, it's almost reflective, like Snoke wished he had something better to work with than Ben Solo. Honestly, I think that's the entire point here too. No matter what, Snoke has an implicit disgust for Ben Solo. So around this area of the comic is where things start to really go off the rails in a very good way and very interesting things happen. Ben Solo is before the dark side cave, and just like Luke, Ben Solo asks Snoke what's in there. Snoke tells young Solo, only what you've been too weak to bury. And I think that's an interesting twist on Yoda's words,
Only what you take with you.
And just to make sure Ben Solo really feels alone and not supported before he enters this cave, Snoke throws yet another jab, letting Ben know that he can run away if he'd like. And he's just smiling when he says this. Once inside the cave, we immediately see Jedi Master Luke Skywalker, as he was when the temple was destroyed. Luke tells Kylo he does not want to fight him, but just like Palpatine does to Luke in Age of Rebellion, Snoke seems to be offering some sort of suggestions to Kylo on how to interpret what Luke's saying. Rather than taking Luke's words at face value, the sentiment is filtered through Snoke's manipulation to where Kylo now feels that it's because Luke feared him and his own power. And during the duel, we get more and more suggestions from Snoke to Kylo, manipulating his feeling, letting Kylo know that yes, his uncle would have murdered him had he not woke up. It's very clear why Kylo has the point of view he does on the entire Hutt altercation. And it is also very clear to me in this comic that Kylo knows that Luke is sorry and realizes what he has done is almost unforgivable. What's wild is that we do eventually see this fight come to pass, just like we saw Luke ultimately face Vader in The Empire Strikes Back. Neither duel goes the way either of them hopes, and this further reinforces the fact that whatever Snoke believes Kylo is learning here, well, he isn't learning it. Kylo Ren never rose above his fear of Luke Skywalker, and it's the most obvious in his reaction to Luke arriving on Crate in The Last Jedi. Kylo Ren looks like he's having a panic attack, knowing he has to contend with his former master. Now back in the cave, Kylo does strike down the vision of his old master, and for a moment, Kylo feels ready to become the dark side enforcer. He thinks he's ready, but Snoke knows it's not over, and then we end up seeing Leia and Han. This bit for me is the most telling of the primary internal conflict in Ben. This kid's biggest fear is that he was not loved, and he is absolutely bullshit about it in his adulthood. It's the thing tormenting his mind. Does his family even love him? He believes to a certain degree that his family threw him away, betrayed him. But also, I think he realizes that what the vision speaks is absolutely true. But how can Kylo Ren even come back to his family? He's gone too far, and perhaps this is why he stays aligned with Snoke. Kylo Ren is so angry with his family that even when he fundamentally knows the truth of the matter, he chooses to lash out rather than deal with what's right in front of him. And this is why I think he ends up stabbing the inner walls of the cave, much like when he lashed out on the control panels in The Force Awakens. Kylo can't bring himself to strike his family down, at least not yet. Throughout all these panels, it's almost a re-envisioning of the throne room sequence where Snoke is reading Kylo's mind, narrating every move he makes before his own death. Snoke senses him killing the connection with his family, but as we can see, his parents stand over both of his shoulders gazing upon their lost son. Then Ben Solo turns back and looks at his parents in the cave. And I think here, Kylo Ren knows that he's failed Snoke's training. And while Snoke is oddly convinced that Kylo has achieved severing this familial connection, Kylo destroys the dark side cave before Snoke could even see the outcome of Kylo's training. I'd like to emphasize how wild it is that Kylo, a wannabe Darksider, just destroyed a dark side nexus that has stood for thousands of years. It actually sort of shocks Snoke. Oddly, this is when Snoke is finally impressed with the show of power, but in Snoke's fashion, the moment is quickly undermined as Snoke says he wished to bring more apprentices here. Not even looking at Snoke, Kylo assures him that he will need no other apprentices. And then this is where the story ends. Ultimately, this is my favorite comic in the Age of Resistance series so far. It gives a greater insight into so many moments throughout the sequel trilogy. I mean, for example, I have a better understanding as to why Kylo Ren straight up murdered Lor San Tekka rather than bringing him in for questioning. Lor San Tekka brought up the very thing that Kylo is hiding from, and that's his past. And this is the very thing Snoke abuses him about. So here is another old dude telling Kylo what to think about, what to remember, what to do, and then he lashes out in anger. And being unable to strike down his own parents in the cave, what we saw definitely added a brand new way to look at Han and Kylo on that ledge in The Force Awakens. In my eyes, that moment is already tragic because it's obvious Kylo is immediately broken over his actions. But now there's this new layer of having to contend with this exact situation and being literally unable to strike down this connection. Now, he finally realizes that he can never, ever sever his familial connection. It's permanent. It also reflects what Luke told Kylo on Crate, that if he strikes him down in anger, he will always be with him, just like his father is. Now, to wrap this up, I understand that there are those who are against Kylo coming back to the light, and this is predicated on being pissed off about the death of Han. And to be frank, I get it, I really do. But as far as I'm concerned, this comic just basically solidified to me that Kylo Ren is nothing but dress up. That character will always just be dress up. It's pretend. I think ultimately there will be some moment in The Rise of Skywalker where another cave-esque sequence comes to pass where Kylo hears that he is loved and that it's not too late or something along those lines. I don't think Lucasfilm would be doubling down on this abuse story of Kylo Ren if the trajectory was not one of recovery from this trauma of the past. And if you think that's lame, perfectly fine. But I find this arc in particular to be the most compelling arc in the entire Star Wars saga, which is something I will be making a video on very soon. So I hope you have enjoyed my over-analysis of the comic Snoke, which should have been called Ben because it's essentially about his inability to snuff out the light within him no matter what he does. Snoke does show more of what his true nature is in the comic, and of course there seems to be some implied meaning to his obsidian ring, but I'm not convinced yet that we are dealing with Star Wars Horcruxes. But I do think the similarities between how Palpatine and Snoke manipulate people's thoughts are worth considering. Now, I'm also curious as to all of your takeaways from this comic. And if you have not read it yet, please get your hands on a copy. It's a very, very fun read, and it's definitely beautiful to look at. And with that said, AT-AT Chat is signing off.